stupid setup, but welcome to the What's the BPM podcast, John Course. Thank you very much for having me down to the Gold Coast whilst you're on holiday.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm very chilled. So I'm like, whatever, how it flows. I couldn't be more relaxed than I've been in a while, actually.
It's good. It's good. It's so relaxing down here. It's just one of them places. It's just a great place to be on Earth.
Yeah, I mean, Melbourne's great in the summer, but getting away is always a pleasure, and some pool time, some water time, some sunshine, good for the soul.
Yeah. And you do this every year, you're saying?
Yeah, try to, a couple of times a year. So,
well, mate, this is a podcast about the history of the Australian scene. So let's get back to the start of your journey. Like, were you born in Australia?
Yeah, born in Australia, Mornington Peninsula in Melbourne, and was always kind of around music with my mum and my sister, and then got into the hip hop movement first, really, and through breakdancing, and then saw the movie Beat Street and had a DJ in the basement. I don't know if you've seen the movie, and I was like already into hip hop, and so I understood about scratching and then just got into turntablism kind of stuff and was like addicted to music from that point forward.
It's funny. A lot of house music DJs got into it through the hip hop and breakdancing. I find that interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I was just always around music, so that was kind of like an extension of that. And the hip hop culture, the DJ culture behind it was all about kind of messing with beats and doing tricks and scratching and that side of it. So it was, I don't know, it just always appealed to me.
So you were into the breakdancing. I swear I've seen something online that you were into ballroom dancing.
Oh, back when I was a kid, yeah, my mum used to go ballroom dancing, and I used to go with my sister. That is a very long time ago.
So when did you stop doing that?
But just probably 16 or 17. But
Okay, yeah.
Just music was always. I remember sitting next to the stereo when I was 5 or 6 while my mum was listening to music. So I was always listening to music, and I guess the thing that any kind of dancing of any sort, really, it gives you an understanding of bars and the structure of music and beats and rhythms, hopefully, unless you're no good at it. But hopefully you pick up the rhythms and stuff. So, that led very well into the DJ lifestyle for sure.
So is that how you found house music? Just like...
Not really. I mean, I started DJing when I was a teenager, before the house music thing had really happened. House music broke in 88, and I started DJing when I was a teenager in like 86. So, the famous Summer of Love in Europe was the summer of 88 over there. And the first music that I got introduced to when I DJ'd at a club, I just went to this little club in my hometown of Frankston. I was underage, and I said, "Oh, I DJ a little bit. Can I play some tunes here?" And the guy was like, "Well, sure, maybe come along next week and you can do like 8 to 9. So I did 8 to 9, but I brought stacks of people with me. When I say stacks, the venue only held probably 80, and I probably bought 50. Yeah, so I don't think he cared how I played music, but he was like, "It's a Thursday night and you've just bought 50 people. You can definitely come back." And I started going back, and the guy Randall who ran the place, was purely into funk, soul, reggae, and I just got a great schooling in old funk, soul, reggae, and obviously a little bit of disco around that. And I was playing kind of a Tello house kind of stuff, and then house music broke through, and I started, getting it, finding it and buying it, just because I was very open-minded to what music was around. So, you're just young, enthusiastic. You're not set in any way yet. You're not set in any style. You just, hey, what's coming? And you're just open to everything. And
Where are you buying the records from?
Back then, used to go into the city, Central Station Records in Melbourne, in City Square. But there was a Central Station Brisbane, there was Adelaide, there was Sydney, Perth. There were central stations, 5 or 6 of them around the country, maybe more. But at the time, I was only DJing in Melbourne, so I was going to the one in. It used to be in the middle of the CBD, and then it moved to Flinders Street. And then I got a residency at a club called the York Butter Factory, which is now a sandwich store. But it was quite a big, busy club, and I played 5 nights a week and I was still underage. Not that they necessarily knew that, but I used to literally play Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 8 till 3 Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and 8 till 5 Friday, Saturday. And that was every week for 6 months. So, I was doing 35 hours a week on the decks. There were 3 turntables there. I'd go record shopping on a Tuesday, finish record shopping, have some dinner in the city, go to the club, play. Used to keep my records there, catch trains back to Frankston where I lived. And I was just loved it, loved buying music, spent a fortune on music. It was like $15 a 12-inch. Now you can spend $15 on Beatport and get about 8 records. Back then it was a different setup, and it was just a passion, a job that I loved, and I was only 17. So somebody who was paying me must have known how old I was, because you've got to set all that stuff up. But the club didn't potentially know, and I was off to the races.
And so it just grew from there. Just gigs, more gigs, more gigs.
Yeah, back then the DJ wasn't like some superstar that traveled the whole world. They were kind of, you were the guy in the corner that played the music at the club, And there was certainly DJ culture, as I said, around hip hop. There was a DJ culture, but there wasn't really a DJ culture like it is today. And I don't think anybody who was playing music back then would have thought it could grow to the level that it has grown to. But I was just into the music, liked playing it, and it was a great grounding to get technically your skills really on point. And I think even more importantly, programming music, because I was the only DJ on, and I had to try and make the night flow from start to finish, and I had to try and keep it busy until the end. You really learnt when to play music, when to play the big records, when you could get a bit more indulgent, what to save for later on so that the night had a flow. And I think programming is probably the most important part of DJing that probably suffers a little now, because new DJs just don't have the experience of longer sets.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably something that's massively missing these days. Hey, guys rock up, play for an hour, play all their hits, leave.
Yeah, I think the promoters and the people that are running good nights and good clubs, they understand the flow of the night and they program DJs accordingly. And they often have, kind of maybe a dinner with all the DJs, and they talk about the direction they want the night to go, and and they wouldn't be putting on a DJ at the start that's going to bang it crazy when they want a more chilled vibe. So that sort of stuff, it's just about getting the flow right, and most good promoters know how to do that.
Yeah. I went to a gig on over the holidays up the coast, and it was a huge, massive gig on the Sunshine Coast. But that's one thing I think they probably got to work on, is that they had a lot of harder, like, I don't want to sound old, but like the younger guys are playing this really hard, fast, like almost hard house.
There was hard music, 30 years ago. Like, I don't think that's ever changed. There was, that sound that come out of Rotterdam in Holland. And there's definitely a hard house scene still now, and a harder tech scene. I'm not, look, if you're at one of those nights, maybe playing at 140 is how you start the night, right? But it's not just about the tempo, it's about the songs, and, it doesn't matter what scene you have or what style of music it is, whether it be drum and bass or hip hop or traditional house music or Afro or tech house or bangers or whatever, there's still big records and there's less known records. And it's about filtering them and playing them so that the night has a build and has a vibe to it, instead of just coming on and playing all of the big records of your particular scene because you've practiced your set at home. I mean, I never practice a set at home. I never know what I'm going to play. I turn up with, I got 4,500 songs on my hard drive. I've got them sorted out very well. I can search through them and find things that I want to find. And I just never go in with, I mean, obviously New Year's Eve, yeah, I might go in with a thought about what I'm going to play at midnight. But outside of that, if someone played that record at 10 to 12, I'll just find another record. You can't be a DJ. The primary job of a DJ is selecting music for the moment. And you can't predict what that moment is going to be like in your bedroom or in your house or in your spare room or in your hotel room 4 hours before the gig. You just can't do it.
I agree. So, I mean, I want to kind of keep going through chronologically, but I just want to dig in on that a little bit. So I find it to be such a fascinating thing. Like, you don't know what you're going to play. Do you just have like a selection of tracks per gig and you go, I really want to play these? Like, how do you do it?
I mean, I have some vibe of what the gig is going to be about before I get there. And if I've never played there before, I want to get there at least an hour before I play so that I can hear what else is going on and I can look at what's there. And then from that, I have my music sorted out. I mean, I have the beauty of Record Box, and for those that don't know about the technical side of DJing, Record Box is a program that's linked to CDJs, and CDJs is a pioneer product that are in nearly every professional nightclub in the world. And if you use Record Box, you have the ability to search with the CDJ in multiple ways. You can search by title, by artist, by keywords, by the key of the song, by the tempo, and you can have multiple folders that you make that have different styles of music. So I've got folders that are like, just for instance, at the moment, I've got, a new folder that's just started called January, February 2026. And whatever I get that's new goes into that folder, and it's got a few subgenres in it. It's got commercial, it's got house, and it's got techno. And by techno, I mean just anything harder, club music. It could be tech house. It could be, tougher like Dom Dollar, Odd Mob style, or it could be more underground prog. And then in the house folder is anything from Afro to traditional house to kind of new school house. And then in the commercial folder is just anything that is kind of on the edge of where pop music is at, but is in a dance genre. And I've been doing that ever since the digital thing's out. So I can go back to 2017 and click on my commercial folder and just search through and go, oh, what's here? So I've got that, but also I've got folders for specific gigs that I play regularly. I have folders for years because I do a lot of old school stuff. So I've got like, I don't know if you know the Testament parties that Ministry recently did, but they set them up in 90s and 2000s. So I've got a 90s folder. I've got a 2000s folder. I've got an old school Q-Bar folder, which was a club in Melbourne that was really big. I've got an old school One Love folder. I've got all of my Ministry CDs that I mixed for Ministry. I've got folders with every track I could find that's available that I ever put on a Ministry CD, so that if I'm playing a gig and somebody says, man, I love when you mix the annual number 5, it's my favorite CD, could you play something off that? I can just go into annual 5 JC mix and pick a track and play it. So organization on the front end means you have this flexibility when you get to a gig that I've said to people, like, I think it's nearly impossible to burn somebody as a DJ. Like, you could come on before me and play what you think are the biggest old school records ever, and I'm still going to have a big old school record that you didn't play because there's so many of them. And if you've got your music sorted out, you can find one and you're never in trouble, But I've always said, when I used to play vinyl, I used to do a radio show, I used to say, check your B-sides, because there was always some gems on old school vinyl records. I mean, Put Your Hands Up for Detroit was a B-side originally, even though it became obviously an A-side and a massive hit. So there's always been records that you just got to dig, and you just got to know where they are and be able to find them,
Yeah. Sorry to get off track there, but I just always find that stuff fascinating. But so getting back to your like your DJ career.
Yep.
What moment did you realize, I think I can make like this more than a hobby?
I mean, look, the house music thing started in kind of 88 and 89, and I was playing at that time Chasers and Chevron, which were two good clubs in Melbourne, pretty big clubs. The house music thing started to grow around, around that time. Myself and Andy Van, we had set up a little studio and started buying equipment and started trying to make records and remix records. And you needed a lot of stuff back then. You needed, I think, like a sampler that had 7 seconds of CD quality sampling was about $5,000. Now my phone would easily record, like, I don't know, 45 minutes. Now it's not going to be CD quality, but the point is that technology has changed so much that, sampling ability is just infinite effectively now when it comes to making music. So we started buying equipment, and then we could see this growing dance music culture. We were part of it, and we were just enthusiastic, still young guys, just enthusiastic about making music. We'd read magazines. First time I went to London was with Andy, and we had like a list of records we wanted to find, and we had a list of record shops to go to, and all we basically did was go out and go to club nights and go to record shops. I think we might have gone to, we probably went to the Tower of London on one of those trips to do a touristy thing, but effectively we were just addicted to dance music, and that was all we wanted to do, was find music, hear DJs, go clubbing, and just suck all of that up and try and bring it back and feast on it in Melbourne. And eventually we got a few bookings interstate as the house music thing grew, and then we started the label. And even when we started the label, I don't think we were thinking, there was no grand plan to have this label that would run for 30 plus years, or that a DJ career that would still be going in 25, 30 years. There was no thought of that. It was just kind of like, we love what we're doing. We're paying the bills. We've got a good life here. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. And, it kind of like, there wasn't a single moment where you went from having no idea what the future could look like to going, oh, it's like it is today. It just slowly evolved. It didn't go from black to white. It went from black to dark grey to medium grey to, it just a slow evolution of rethinking. And then, you start to have some records that we signed on the label or that we made that did well in Europe. And, I remember being in a music conference in France, and being in a petrol station across the road from the hotel, which was miles away from the conference because we had no money and we were trying to do it on the cheap. And I was standing in this petrol station waiting to buy like a Coke or some chips or something, and our song came on the radio. And this is a song that we've made in our studio in a shed behind a house in Frankston, which is like an hour from Melbourne, and it comes on the radio in France. And I was like, a song called Gotta Have Hope by Blackout, which I made, me, Andy Van, Sergeant Slick, and a guy called Darren Glenn. And it was like, wow, our song's on the radio overseas. And that's another little thing that makes you think, wow, okay, we can make a record in Australia and it can grow. And you just kept having that thought process. So those things certainly help you gain some belief in what could be, but I don't think there was a single point where you went, right, we're on here.
Do you remember like what the first records that actually broke through on the label were?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, maybe we had an early release. I mean, we had an early release with Carl Cox, which was Mark James, who ran Future Entertainment, was touring Carl, asked Carl if he wanted to go into the studio, and they come down into our studio, and I ran the session, and I did all the programming for the track, and we made this song called Eternal by Eternal. Underground rave record, 135 beats a minute. And Carl signed it to his label that he was dealing with in Europe. And we put it out on Vicious in Australia, and we put it out on vinyl as well. So that was like quite a big moment. But again, while Carl was a big DJ, it was still, the early days in what the scene was going to become. And then the first record that kind of had any crossover was a song called Dreams of Heaven by Ground Level, which was inside the UK pop chart. And again, we were over there at a rave, and we heard somebody play that while we were standing in a queue waiting to get a drink, and it was like, that was the first time we heard one of our songs played at an international club. Sasha was a DJ, and he played it, and we were just like, wow, man, like, and there's hundreds of moments like that now, but they were probably the first two, and that was in the first 10 releases we ever did on the label, that those two records fell within.
Must have been cool being like you to think that it was something you've made in your like back garden pretty much, and then they're playing it at these massive raves or festivals in Europe.
Yeah.
Must have been so cool. You've worked under like a few different aliases. Tell us a bit about your aliases.
Yeah, I mean, I did a little thing called JAC, which are just my initials. And it's just because it was quite underground. And I mean, look, I'm not a prolific producer by any standards. I've been much more of a DJ and entrenched in what DJing is intrinsically about than I have been a studio bod. Early days with Andy Van in our little studio, we definitely made a lot of things together, did a lot of remixes. But then as far as producing, I used to do things as John Course back then, and me and Andy we did a remix for Defected, and we did some remixes for some other labels early days. And then I had a project that was just JAC, which was just a little bit more underground stuff. And then I also had a project with a guy called Mr. Timothy of Electro Funk Lovers, and we did quite a lot of remixes, and that was in the kind of, I guess, 2009 kind of onwards period when electro was kind of big. And then I just do stuff as John Course again now. As I said, I wouldn't call myself a prolific producer by any means. I mean, always had ideas, always tried to understand the technical side of it as best as possible, but I've often had collaborators that have helped engineer or mix down something or master it to make it sound better. I think collaborations are great because I can bring my knowledge to the table, and somebody that spends every single day making a kick drum sound better and better and better can apply that knowledge to my production, and suddenly my production sounds better. So, collaborating with people that bring something else to the table and a skill that you don't have is always great.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, a lot of people get their music ghost produced or whatever. I don't know why they're just not more open about it. Like, I don't think anyone cares really.
Look, I think there's a difference. I mean, ghost producing is what I consider to be real ghost producing is like, hey, can you make me a record? Here's $1,000. And you deliver it back, and I go, yep, thanks, right? That's ghost producing. If I'm sitting here and you're the guy who's touching the keyboard and I'm saying, no, I don't, that sound's not right. I want a sound that's more like I want a old school piano-y, ravey sound instead of that kind of lush piano that you've got. I want something more raw, and I'm producing. And the traditional producer, if you go back to rock and roll, the producer just sat in the room with the band. He didn't play any instruments. He didn't necessarily even work the console because it was an engineer. He just steered the session and said, hey, I think this should be use the Rhodes guitar, not the whatever, or let's do an acoustic guitar on the intro instead of an electric guitar, or let's, do another take on that vocal and make it more raw or whatever. They were steering the sound. And with electronic music, it all gets mixed up into like the engineer, the producer, the songwriter, the artist, the mastering person, the vocal engineer. It all becomes this one job, and it doesn't have to. It can still be somewhat separated, and you can use the best skills that each person brings to the table. So, so collaborating, hey, stacks of people collaborate. Lots of people have people that come in and help finish off a song that's well and truly on the way, but it needs a little rethink at the end. And that's all great. Ghost producing, where you just pay somebody to make you a record, is kind of like, what are you really achieving? Because you're not building your own sound. Someone else is building your sound. They're going to be in control of it. Are you ever going to be able to make it yourself? So I don't really get why you would do that, especially today when the technology is available on a laptop to make music. Anybody should be able to do it. And if you need help to make your record sound sonically better, then collaborate with somebody, credit them, be co-writers, and say, yeah, I made this record with Ivan Goff, or I made this record with, whoever it might be. And what's the problem,
Yeah. With Vicious, Madison Avenue was obviously huge. I'm sure there's a cool story with you signing a Madison Avenue track in the UK.
Well,
Can you tell us that story?
Well, look, Madison Avenue was my business partner, Andy. So we had the track signed because Andy was doing his project, the Madison Avenue project, on Vicious. But the old way of releasing music was that there would be record labels in every country in the world that would understand how to market, produce, distribute, because you had to get a CD or a piece of vinyl from a manufacturing plant to a record store. And that was hard to do from Australia, to get records and CDs all over the world. So we would put the vinyl out and we would distribute it all around the world. But then different countries would then hear that song, and labels would be like, oh, I like that song. I'd be interested in maybe signing the rights for the UK. So we went to this music conference in France, and we used to just try and meet with as many labels as possible. And it would be like speed dating. You got 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Hey, you're from Universal Music, or you're from, some label in Europe, Subliminal Records, Defected, whoever it might be. And I'm like, hey, here's our new stuff. Love you to have a listen, see if there's anything that interests you. What have you got that you might be interested in releasing in Australia? And you would just swap music. And we had Don't Call Me Baby. We had 10 copies of it that we'd given out at Meedham. And from those 10 copies, a couple of really big labels just didn't even contact us at all. But 2 labels in the UK the next week were like, are you going to be in London? We want to talk to you. And so me and Andy obviously were like, great, both these labels were really good. And we went to one label and we did the meeting, and he was like, I really want to do this record. Big well-known label. I won't go into the detail now, but I really want to do this record. Here's a contract. And we're like, look, we're not going to just sign a contract right here, right now. We need to do a couple of other conversations. And he's like, I really want this record. And we said, look, we'll come back to you, but really appreciate that you're interested. And then we got in a cab, and this guy rang Andy back while I was giving the address of the next meeting to the cab driver. And he heard the address and he knew where we were going. And he's like, don't go to EMI. I want this record. Don't go there. And we were just laughing about it. and we ended up having the meeting with Virgin, which was in the EMI office, and we ultimately signed the record to Virgin for the UK. A guy called Andy Thompson, who I still speak to every now and then, and and that's how the record got signed in Europe. And we had some conditions in the agreement that we wanted to have some input over remixes and stuff. But I mean, creatively, that was Andy's and Shane's project, the vocalist, and they produced that music together. And on that side, I was basically just an A&R guy that gave feedback on the record. We signed it to Virgin in the UK, and it was we had the white label vinyl in January, and we released it in Australia in September on a CD single. And that's how long it took for that record to grow, which is unheard of in today's market, right? That never happens now. So from vinyl, it was like test pressings, then like 1,000 copies worldwide. Then we went to Medium. Then there was some interest. Then the record was growing internationally because people had got our vinyl. Then we signed the deal. Then they had their vinyl out before the CD came out. Then we put the CD single out in Australia, and it was a very big hit, number 2 on the pop chart, right? And it was played on Triple J, believe it or not, even though it's such a kind of, people think now, such a commercial record. But at the time, it was a very kind of cool house record. Got played on Triple J, got played on all the commercial stations. We had a big hit. Then it got released in England on Virgin, leading into the winter about a month later. And it charted at like 37 or something first week in, and they deleted it straight away. And they said, we reckon this song is a hit. I think we've put it out at the wrong time. We're going to rethink it. We're going to put it out leading into the English summer in like 4 months' time after their winter was over. And sure enough, they began a new marketing campaign with some new remixes. And they started pushing it. And all the time, the original and there was a remix by Eric Murillo that got played in clubs. And all over the winter in Europe, our summer, those 2 mixes, the original and that, still got played, and no one could find the record because it wasn't released. And then they re-released it in May, and it went straight to number 1 on the pop chart. Number 2 was Britney Spears, and number 3 was Posh Spice's debut record. And I remember Andy telling me when you lead up to releasing a record back then in the UK, probably still now, you did a radio round. So the week leading up to your record coming out, you were in London, going to every radio station in England that you could to do interviews, to talk about it. And Andy was saying him and Shane used to cross paths with Posh Spice all the time because she was on her solo tour to get her record promoted. And so were Andy and Shane. And Don't Call Me Baby went in at number 1, the first Australian number 1 by an Australian artist, written in Australia, produced in Australia for a really, really long time. And the next week, Who the Hell Are You, the follow-up single, got released in Australia, and it went straight to number 1. So between the two, it was they were huge records that just were. I mean, Don't Call Me Baby was just unstoppable. It was just one of those songs that was just huge, and it was just cool how it all flowed.
So you must have been just ecstatic over that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, speaking to Andy on the phone, and he was obviously in Europe at the time, him and Shane. They were promoting the record all over Europe, and, it went to number 1 in the UK on the pop chart. We knew it was that at the time they had midweek sales and they had end of week sales. And we knew we were going to, after the midweeks, we knew we were going to be like right up there. We thought we're going to be probably top 5, which we were still like, wow, can you imagine this record that's been made in our back shed is going to be in the pop chart top 5? And then it turns out it went to number 1. It was crazy, And I remember speaking to Andy on the phone and just being, wow, mate, like, congratulations, like, who'd have thought? And from then, obviously, when you're making music and putting music out and signing people, I mean, the world's your oyster. What like not just open doors, but also the thought process about what a song could do. Even now, artists will say to us, Madison Avenue changed how we thought about what our music could do. Because the same way that a kid sees what Dom Dollar's doing now and thinks, exactly, Dom Dollar's from the suburbs of Melbourne, and there's no reason why anybody from anywhere, Black Coffee from, from Africa, and, there's people all over the world that have broken through doing what they do. And I think, the lid is well and truly off. I'm not saying it's easy. It's certainly very hard now, maybe even harder than ever. But you can have those aspirations and they're not unrealistic. It's just you've got to be the one person that gets there, but striving towards it.
A bit of luck and choose the right little pathway and you can get there, hey?
Oh, look, no one gets there without really hard work. And I don't think anyone gets there without being really good at what they do. Even if you're not into their music, I don't play any music that Timmy Trumpet makes because he makes a completely different style to what I play. But the level of what he does and how hard he does it and how well he does it is unquestionable. Now, there's people that would go, oh, they bag Timmy out because they don't like his music, but they forget that that's just a different genre. That's just like bagging out the Rolling Stones because you don't like rock. I mean, there are a lot of artists that are very successful, but I would say there's no artists that are successful that don't work really hard, aren't really good at what they do, and in this day and age don't have really good people around them. I think those three things across every successful artist you can think of, name any artist, they're all going to have good people around them. They're all going to be good at making music if they're producers, and they're all going to be very good within their specific genre or whatever it is. And they're all going to work super hard.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of like young producers, do you want to tell us how did you discover Avicii?
Well, another story about, me and Andy have run Vicious since we started it. And during Vicious has always evolved musically and changed. And as the EDM thing started to get bigger, Andy had his project called Vandalism, which was the project he did after Madison Avenue. And we started signing a lot of kind of tougher electro music at the time. And there was this guy in Melbourne who lived in Melbourne called Dirty South that sent Andy a demo. And we heard the demo and we were like, love to sign some music from Dirty South. So we signed Dirty South and we started putting his tracks out. And Avicii was 17 at this time. And Vandalism were on tour in Sweden. And they got booked at this club that was booked by this guy called Ash Panauri. And Ash Panauri, when they got to the club, said, tomorrow, I want you to come and meet this kid that I'm managing called Avicii. So Andy went to Avicii's little one-bedroom apartment and they played demos and they said, we love what Dirty South makes. We love the sound that you're putting out on the label. We'd love to be able to sign you some music. And at the time, this is early days of Avicii. No one really knew who he was. But the demos were mostly instrumental club music. There was very little vocal on anything. Andy sent them back and he's like, I really like this kid's music. I listened to it. I was like, absolutely agree. Let's get a deal over. And we got a deal over. Him and Ash looked at it and they signed a deal with us. And we ended up putting out kind of 9 Avicii records across a 2-year period. And the first record he put out after our deal ended was Levels. So that's how much his career grew during that period. His first ever Beatport #1 was My Feelings for You, which we put out on Vicious. And he was just this super talented kid that had a real knack for melody. Even in our early Avicii records, you can hear that beautiful melody that he always had and he kept in his music right through his whole career. And then after that, we weren't really involved in his career from Levels onwards. By that time, he was kind of releasing his music on his own kind of setup. And, we brought him out to Australia for the first time. He played like 3 little shows. And then a year and a half later, Levels had come out and he headlined Stereosonic. And that's how quickly he went from kind of like another guy in the pack to like that Levels record. He was already on the way. He'd had some big records on a club level with us. And then he'd done a couple of records as Tim Berg with Bromance. And he was networking with and he's based in Sweden, so he's playing all the right shows. And by this time, Getter and Tiesto and Swedish House Mafia and all these people knew who he was. And yeah, his career it was on the way up and up, and then Levels just took it to the next level. And then that sound broke in America. And then, that sound with guys like Avicii, Getter, Swedish House Mafia, Afrojack, all that, they just ruled the world, I mean, it's such a tragic story for a beautiful guy, But I think, some people, you see the documentaries and people point their finger at this and that, but I just think at the end of the day, he was a guy that wasn't built for touring. He was a guy with beautiful melodic ideas, very creative, amazing producer, and, got into it at such a young age and just, the industry can be brutal. Like if you don't have some advocacy and some understanding on how to keep it balanced, you're on the road like Avicii would have been, and you're doing, I don't know, 200, 250 shows a year. You know what I mean? Like, and the thing is, people might be in town and you're in Brisbane and Avicii comes. He only comes once every 2 years. But for Avicii, every night is like that Brisbane night. So, when people are on the road like that, and in a way, as a legacy of what happened with Avicii is that, the mental health of artists is much more spoken about now. It's much more considered, I think, by managers, by labels, by everybody that's in the business, because being on the road like that would be, I mean, I've been on the road a little bit, but never to that level. And I think it would be, even though the money would be amazing, it'd be so hectic, and if you don't have people around you that can get some balance, you could easily just get caught up in, a whole life that is not good for you.
Yeah, I don't want to get too off track, but I just feel like some of the younger guys that are doing it now, like the first name that come to mind is Josh Baker. Like, he's like one of them guys that's coming up and he's touring the world, but he offsets it with like a super healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I just don't think 20 years ago people were doing that.
Oh, John Summit doesn't drink.
Yeah.
Like one of the biggest DJs in the world. Steve Aoki, like him or don't like him, leads a super healthy lifestyle, outside of the DJ box. And yeah, I think, look, some people can do it too. Tiesto's been touring internationally for probably longer than almost any other DJ. Carl Cox has been touring internationally for a really long time. But they seem to be able to, certainly with Carl, he certainly can step back and he keeps his feet on the ground, and I think he loves playing music and he still loves it, but he's got a balance that it's not everything. He's not just caught up in that. It's not all about that lifestyle, and just being the guy in the DJ box is not what his whole life is about. And I think you're right. The advocacy of, artists, DJs, it's completely different now. I still think there'll be people who getting, cane it too much, party too hard, and end up, potentially passing away the same way that actors, pop musicians, rock musicians, dance music DJs, they've all got those same temptations, and there's always going to be a percentage that go with that temptation and can't handle it, unfortunately.
So, like getting back to you, and whilst we're on the subject of touring, like I think back when the Ministry of Sound CDs came out, and it was like guys like you and Mark mixing them, you guys were touring heaps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like around Australia. I'm sort of
we would do. So the touring used to be timed with the release of the CDs. So the annual used to come out roughly first week of November, leading up to November, December for Christmas. And part of mixing the CD was they would book you every week. Ministry used to say, right, we'll get you gigs from the start of November and until basically Christmas. And it'd be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday for about 8 weekends in a row, where you could be basically anywhere in the country. And I remember, we would do like, I don't know, let's say Thursday, Melbourne, Friday, Sydney, Saturday, Wollongong, Sunday, Newcastle, then I fly back to Melbourne. And the next Thursday it would be like, okay, the next Friday to be like Adelaide, then Saturday, Perth, then Sunday, south of Perth maybe, and then back to Perth, back to Melbourne. Next weekend, it'd be Brisbane to Cairns to Rockhampton, back to Melbourne. Next weekend, Canberra to Alice Springs, back to Melbourne. Next weekend, Darwin to Port Hedland to, and that was just we went everywhere. And that was every November, December. And also I used to mix the session CDs, which come out in the middle of the year. So May, June was the same. So for 4 months of the year, it was pretty hectic touring. Yeah, for sure. But I didn't have, I certainly didn't have wife and family like I do now. And then even in between that, I was playing for One Love in Sydney once a month. I was playing for One Love in Adelaide once a month. One Love Melbourne every weekend. So there's a lot of touring in between that as well. But at the time, I was kind of just like young and just eating it all up. Again, like new experiences, being on the road like that. Appreciate that you got to travel and play music for a living, So,
and you're playing so much, you just match fit.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure you can still do it with your eyes closed now, but I bet back then you just.
Yeah, and I guess you're also the same way that I said, like I remember playing in regional towns and people are like, we've been waiting for this night for like 2 months since it got announced. And they're like, are you coming to the after party? And I'm like, no. I'm like, because I've got to do this again tomorrow night.
Yeah.
And tomorrow night, you'll be recovering from the after party and just chilling out for the next week, and I'll be on the road again. So you can't, there's no doubt that we had, nights where we would extend a stay. Like if we're on the Gold Coast, play for Joey at Platinum, and obviously it was always a big, alcohol drink-a-thon. You extend the trip a couple of days and chill out up here once you're finished. You could do stuff like that, but you had the ability. You were also lucky that when you stepped into the party, you were the guest, right? So you weren't doing the warm up. You weren't there for the night where the club was dead. You were only there on the big night when it was heaving and everyone was up for it. So not only were you match fit as a DJ, but in a way the crowd was match fit because they were always big nights. Yeah. So that helps as well.
Can you you probably might not want to answer this, but can you think of any of your favourite clubs on those tours?
Oh, look, definitely Platinum was a killer on the Gold Coast at the peak of that sound. I'm talking like sneaky sound system and the early EDM thing. Platinum was one of the best places to play.
Kind of like 2007, around that period.
No, maybe a bit later than that. I would think more like 2010, 12. I mean, I think, 2009 onward, I would say around that time, because we signed Avicii in 2008. So that's the start of it.
Yeah.
I remember One Love was already running when David Guetta put out an album called One Love, which was his first big album. And we were kind of thinking it was kind of ironic that it was called the same thing as the club that we played at regularly. And the Ministry stuff was well and truly firing by then. So yeah, it was through that period.
So like Platinum on the Goldie. I mean, you surely family in Brisbane. That's a
Platinum. Look, we used to do the Ministry parties. Used to be Platinum on the Gold Coast. Family used to be Metro in Brisbane. Used to be either at One Love or Seven, mostly in Melbourne. Sometimes Room. In Sydney, they always used to be at Kink, the Art House. A lot of the Ministry things, they had the deals locked in with the venues, so you went back to the same place all the time for those. I mean, there was slightly different ones, but the mainstay ones were that. I mean, they all had their moments. Adelaide was heaven sometimes, which was huge.
You got any wild stories you can tell us? that you can tell us from those days?
Nothing really crazy. I mean, I remember we were playing Alice Springs and we were the venue was next to a backpacker and the backpackers was kind of joined to it. And we're halfway through the party and the party's sold out and the fire alarms go off and the fire department walk into the club and tell us everyone's got to get out. So the firemen are literally standing in the DJ console telling us to stop the music. So we stopped the music and then everyone's moving outside and then they found out that it was like a false alarm in the backpackers. So they stopped it and the fire department's like, right, you can all come back in now. So the party was back on. Some crazy stuff like that from time to time, but nothing really outrageous, I mean, I remember a few regional gigs where there was one where the driver picks me up, takes me to the hotel, looked like he was a bit of a party guy. And he's like, can't wait for tonight. It's going to be great. So I see him at the venue. He picks me up to drive me to the venue. And then I'm like, oh, are you driving around the rest of the night or what? He's like, no, I'm coming in now. And then at the end of the night, he's absolutely sideways. And you can tell that he's taken whatever drug was available. And he's like, where you want to go now? And I'm like, mate, you're not taking me anywhere. I can walk back to the hotel. It's just around the corner. So he's like, oh, cool. And then the next morning, he's come straight from the after party at a house to pick me up to take me to the airport. And I just rang the promoter and I'm like, no offense to this guy, but I'm not going in a car with him to the airport because he's just told me he's been at the after party at someone's house all night. I said he's absolutely off his head and, he just wants to do the right thing because he got booked to drive me. But I said, you need to find somebody else and my flight's soon. So, there's a few stories like that. But by and large, we just, a few bad hangovers. That's about it.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I'm sure there's some you just can't tell me. But getting back to say modern times, really, you've been doing like you said before we were recording, the label's been going 30 years. You've had your radio shows, the mixed CDs, and then now we're doing all these Heritage House events, like Testament. I've been to a few of those Testament shows, I mean, I was at the Gold Coast one recently. That's where I met you for the first time.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah, I mean, the retro thing, I think the retro thing with rock, with pop music, and with dance music, it's all come back around. And I think things like the Ministry of Sound Orchestra, the Testament parties, I do a huge event in Melbourne called Reminisce. They all tap into the heritage of dance music and the fact that there's people who are now 40, 50 years old that were out 25 years ago hearing dance music at an underground club or at a rave somewhere around the country, and they've now had kids, their kids have moved out, and they can go out again and they want to hear the music that they went out to originally. But the ironic thing is that there's a whole young generation that are now hearing that music and hearing the energy, and it's getting sampled in new records. You know, there's so much new music that's got old records sampled in it, and I think that's just all tapping into this resurgence of old school. And the old school that's relevant is the early house music period. So, I mean, the vibes at some of those parties has been absolutely mental atmosphere, and everyone's just up for a great night. You know, I mean, I love new music still. I still love new music. I still think that the kid who's 18 and going out 4 nights a week listening to club music, he or she is as excited about that as we were when we were 18. The difference is that, you know, people who get older who aren't in the business, they don't get to hear new music because their lifestyle changes. And they go from a relationship with music that is 4 nights a week, every week, to one that is maybe 1 night out every 2 months. So, of course, they don't know the new music. They go to a club that has new music and they're like, I don't know any of this, you know? And they tend to say our music was better. But really, you just had a closer relationship with your music during your party period. And as I said, I think there's amazing new music. And as DJs, we are constantly promoters who've been promoting for 30 years. They still put on new events that are great. And it's because they're still in touch with DJs and music, and they haven't stopped and committed themselves to a particular period. And as DJs who are still around, I think it's the same certainly for me. I haven't stopped and said, that's the period. I've just always bought new music, been into new music. Of course, I get booked for old school things, but sometimes I get booked for like 90s. Sometimes I get booked for 2000s. Sometimes now I get booked for like somebody wants music from 2010 because that's 15 years ago, 16 now. That's 16 years ago. So technically is that old school? Like, but it could be 20 years newer than something from 1991.
Yeah.
So, you know, everyone to their own. Everyone's got their period they love. And I do play a lot of music from older periods, and I do all of those parties, and the atmosphere is absolutely fantastic. But, you know, New Year's Eve the atmosphere was great too, and that was stacks of new music. So there's always a balance, you know?
Yeah. Well, hopefully we're not running out of time, but I just wanted to say that, like, not that it matters what the crowd looks like, but the crowd at the Testament gigs, even though they're older, it still attracts like good-looking people. Do you find that? Like at the Gold Coast gig, I was looking around thinking everyone's older, but they're all in good nick. They all look good.
That might be more of a testament just to the Gold Coast lifestyle than anything. You know, up here you wake up in the morning when you're on holiday and look out the balcony at the water, and there's the walking track is full at 5:30.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. You know, like you're going to get guilted into going for a walk whether you do or don't. So, no, I don't really think particularly that. I do think sometimes the atmosphere is really good. And the funny thing is, during COVID, which was a terrible time for nightlife and a terrible time for clubbing, and any hospitality for that matter, I ended up doing a broadcast from my house, and I did that broadcast for 60 weeks in a row. And the first week I did it, there was about 4,000 people watching it. And because I could play whatever I want and I didn't have a dance floor to worry about, I had my entire record collection literally behind me. I played just whatever I wanted to play, and I played new music and I played old music. And the amount of older people that mentioned online where they used to go, but said how refreshing it was to hear new music was really amazed me. And the thing is, when you've grown up clubbing, you understand the vibe of a club. And when you don't club and you're a person, let's say you're a person that's gone to rock festivals your whole life, you will understand the energy of that rock festival way better than I will, because I've never been to one, right? I've always been a dance music head.
Yeah.
And if you come to an electronic event, it's going to take a while for you to get the energy. So if you're new to it, in a way, you're not receptive to new electronic music. Whereas somebody who clubbed 20 years ago, they are receptive even to new electronic music, because they're like, oh, I like the vibe of this. That's what they used to be about. So the amount of people when I did the COVID broadcast that I knew were older and that used to ask for classic songs, but they'd also be like, oh, that new Journey record that you've been playing, I love that. Or that new track from whatever that I was playing on the show, even though they were older crew that didn't know that music, because the show was consistently every week and we were in lockdown and there was nothing else to do in Victoria in particular, but also Sydney, there were so many people that watched that broadcast week after week after week after week. And after 5 weeks, some of those new songs were like, 6 months later when I did a club gig, those people come to that club gig and I played that song and they went off. Yeah, so it's amazing how music can still connect, in different ways. It's kind of one of the cool experiences out of that COVID thing that was not a great time, but that little Saturday night thing was a very rewarding thing for me, and I think a lot of people enjoyed it.
So cool. I mean, you're a label owner. What are your thoughts on streaming? Like, is it good? I mean,
It doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. It's there forever, right? It's like somebody saying, look, music used to come out as printed music and you needed a band or an orchestra to play it. Then there were early recordings. Then there was vinyl. Then there was cassettes. Then there were CDs. Then there were downloads. And now there's streaming. There's always been different formats. The format doesn't really matter. If you're a legacy artist, and by that I mean if you're an old school artist, you should love streaming, because a Rolling Stones fan probably bought their record on vinyl, probably then bought it on CD, probably then bought the download on Apple 10 years ago, and right now the download's on their old computer and the CD and the vinyl is in their garage, and they're listening to it again on Spotify and paying for the privilege again for the 4th time. Yeah. So if you're a legacy artist, you should love streaming, because you're getting paid now forever every time a record gets played. Whereas back in the day, once your CD was sold, if that went to a secondhand record store, you never got paid again. So there's one element of streaming. That's one element that's great. Another element that's great is that you used to have to be close to a record store. And if you wanted to find interesting music, you had to be close to a record store that curated interesting music. There was always a lot of releases, but the Sanity store that was in, let's say, Noosa, was never going to have the same music that the Sanity store was going to have in the middle of Sydney or the middle of Brisbane or the middle of Melbourne. So if you lived in Noosa and you went to the only record store in town, you got your selection to look through and you found whatever you dug, but potentially you didn't find the first Underworld album until Underworld had broken through and you found their 3rd album, And with streaming, you can find everything everywhere, no matter where you live. So now you can go and do a regional gig and somebody can come up and ask you for a song that came out yesterday. And that never used to happen. You could never do that. Whereas now, I'll go to a regional gig and somebody will say, "Can you play the new Marlon Hofstadt?" And it's like, "How did you hear it?" "Oh, I follow him on Instagram and I saw his set at Coachella, which was yesterday. Have you got that record?" Like music travels so fast. They're all the pluses. The downside doesn't have as much value to the person because there's always another record. There's something like 200,000 records go on Spotify every single week. So records don't last as long. Their lifespan's not as long. Does a record stay in somebody's, as a DJ, does it stay in their set for as long as it used to? Probably not. Do as many DJs play the same record as used to? Probably not, because they've all got their little flavor that they can play. So that's probably the downside. You don't get that kind of build up on music like you used to. And a great song can be around for 2 weeks and then disappear when really it deserves to be a bigger record than that.
Yeah, true. Yes, I heard, because I always think of streaming as just like pure evil. But then I was listening to a podcast with, it was hosted by Simon Dunmore, and he was saying, like, what people don't understand, pretty much what you said, but he said people don't understand that back in the day we used to do the first release with the vinyl and then the CDs, and that was it. He said now that song could have another, someone could play and it could have another surge. You get the sales again. It's just like it can just keep going and going. So
absolutely. It's a double-edged sword. There's good and bad, but it's like saying whether you like the laptop or you don't like the laptop, or you like a computer versus a journalist typing it out. I mean, it doesn't matter what you like. It's there. Streaming's never going away. You either get on board or you don't put out music. Or there's obviously more personal ways to put out music if you want to go down that route with the SoundCloud and things like that, where you just have an account on SoundCloud, or various different ways where people are just buying your music direct from you. But every big artist in the world is on Apple and Spotify, and it's just the way of the world. And I think the biggest problem is there's so much music, so it's harder to cut through. So where there used to be a lot of barriers to putting music out. There used to be a lot of people that had to hear the song and think it was worth putting out before it got put out. Now there's hardly any barriers. Nearly anybody can make a song and have it available on some sort of streaming platform, regardless of how good or bad it is. That's not great.
Need more filters to get filter out some of the rubbish. Mate, we've got some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
We're coming to the end. What are you focused on right now?
Family balance with getting some new music made.
Awesome. We kind of already covered this. How do you approach your sets today?
Always with an open mind, always with a lot of music at my fingertips, and just get a vibe for what's happening and go from there.
What still excites you about DJing?
Oh, definitely that moment when, you think you've got a killer record that you're going to play at the right time, and you play it and the vibe matches what you thought it was going to be. That hair on the back of your neck moment still is absolutely addictive.
What's a track at the moment that you've got that's like that?
Oh, I mean, look, there's so much music, but a track that I've been playing for the last couple of years that is, it's not a totally secret weapon, but the Go Up by Cassius, the Butch remix is just, it never fails to create a special moment, always.
Awesome. In an ideal world, vinyl or digital?
Digital, you can carry much more music and you can manipulate it so much easier. Not that vinyl's not cool, but just the digital world gives you so much more versatility.
Club or festival?
Club.
Oh, that's interesting.
For sure. Festivals can have great moments, and it's because there's so many people that are part of it. But the right club with a club that fits 200 people with 250 people in it as an atmosphere and as a DJ set can be incredibly rewarding, can be really good. So I would definitely say club.
Warm up or peak time?
If you're lucky enough to do peak time a lot, peak time.
Easy question, that one. Long or short set?
Long.
Awesome. One track that sums up your career?
Well, that's a bit of a hard one, but probably the record that's never left my collection since I got it would be Let's Start the Dance by Bohannon. 1978 disco record, but kind of like a house record as well. That's probably one that can get played in a lot of sets and can always work.
1978, wow. Advice to new DJs?
Keep your feet on the ground. Find your own thing, like there's no point being the second Dom Dollar. There's no point being the second Avicii. You got to be the first at whatever you are. So just find your groove and, just take your time getting there, like you can't, and you got to be in it for the right reasons. All those people that are successful, they're all into the music and that's what's made it work for them.
They really love the music. And the final question, the most important one, what's the BPM? Like if you got a club night, you want to keep everyone dancing.
128.
That's most popular response, that 128.
Well, I guess you can play a house record a bit faster and you can play a banger a bit slower. But that kind of world around there for the peak of the night is where I would personally feel it would be.
Spot on. Yeah, mate. Well, thank you very much for having a chat to me. This has been awesome.
Thanks, man. Nice to catch up.
Yeah, mate, I'll let you get back to your holiday.
Yes. Woo.